Hello, my name is Ed Frawley. My wife and I own Leerburg. This is a lead-in for a video that we produced, I want to say 8 or 9 years ago. And I want to get the title right because we don't sell it anymore. We have a number of streaming videos that we've produced in the past that we no longer sell because the content has aged so much that what we did in these 10-year-old, 20-year-old, 30-year-old, or 35-year-old videos is different than the way we train today. But this one, if you train hunting dogs, you might find it interesting. It wasn't a bad video, it's just that there's better ways to do it today. It's called Whistle Sits for Hunting Retrievers. And I think that there's even pet dog owners are going to learn from this because it's all reward-based training. And quite frankly, the hunting community over the years has kind of got a bad reputation for they're kind of being yank and crank trainers. They put a lot of pressure on dogs to get the dogs to do what they want to do, and they don't have to do that anymore. So there's a group of trainers that have evolved and learned how to use reward-based training to go out and compete in retriever trials. And back when I started doing videos, and I think I did my first one in 1982, I went and looked at, I won't name the trainer, but I spent 3 days with with a trainer here in Wisconsin that had won multiple national titles. And it was pretty ugly, I'm telling you. That's how I decided I don't want any part of this, because it was high-level stimulation and using horsewhips to get a dog that you put some pressure on him. The dog learns how to turn the pressure off by coming to you with a retrieve. That's not what this is. This video you're going to watch is light years ahead of that. And I think overall, the retriever sport has come light years over that too. Right.
Hi, I'm Ryan with Leerburg, and in this video we're going to show you an easy progression of how to teach whistle sits for hunting retrievers. In retriever work, there are essentially two different kinds of retrieves, marks and blinds. Marks are where the dog actually sees the bird fall, they're sent and expected to hunt out the area that they saw it fall in. Blind retrieves are where the dog does not see the bird fall, and we send them out into the field to hunt the bird. What happens though is sometimes our dog isn't going directly towards the bird, so we want to handle them, meaning we want to point them in the direction of the bird. So what we do is we blow our whistle and we expect them to turn and sit and look at us. And what happens after they turn and sit at us is we can cast them, meaning we can point them in a direction, typically left, right, or back in the direction of the bird. And so when our dog is heading on the field, they're not going directly towards the bird, I can blow my whistle, they look at me for direction, I cast them towards the bird. But the first step of this is to teach them how to sit on the whistle. One of the big challenges new trainers face when trying to teach new exercises for hunting retrievers is that most traditional hunting retriever trainers are very much pressure-based, in that they use significant amount of pressure to teach their dogs different behaviors. This video is going to use primarily rewards in the beginning. Later, we'll show you how to properly introduce the electronic collar so it does not become a crutch in your training. We essentially want to use the electronic collar as little as possible. But we're going to show you a way to properly introduce the collar, so if you need to use it later, the dog has a clear understanding of what it means. Some of the prerequisites that your dog will need to know before you start working on this is they'll have to have a thorough understanding of marker training. If your dog does not understand marker training, or you don't understand marker training, you can check out our other DVDs on marker training. We have a whole DVD on the power of marker training, and we have the power of training food with Michael Ellis. So if you're unfamiliar with marker training, you can go check out either of those DVDs. Your dog will also have to have a good kind of play retrieve. So if you're doing hunter retriever work, just playing with a bumper back and forth should be good enough. Your dog doesn't necessarily have to have a formal retrieve in place, but they should have a desire to go out and pick up either a ball or a bumper out in the field. It's also handy if your dog understands the stand cue, because when I teach the sit, I need my dogs to break out of a sit. And so what you're gonna see me do is tell Willie to stand before I whistle and make him sit in the beginning. So you just need to be able to make sure your dog can break out of a sit, so when you whistle, that they can go back into a sit. Obviously, it does not make sense if your dog is sitting and we blow the whistle. It's not gonna be teaching them anything. So we need to make sure that they can either stand or be walking around a little bit. It will also be helpful if your dog is conditioned to pulling into a harness. We use harnesses to allow dogs to pull, collars to prevent pulling. So as puppies, I teach my dogs if they have a harness on that they're able to pull. So if your dog isn't conditioned to pulling into a harness, what you can do is get a harness on them and actually let them pull you around a little bit. You can throw a ball, let them quickly drag you into that, just to condition them that pulling into a harness is okay. Pulling into a collar is not okay. Now we're going to be going through the list of equipment that you'll need to go through this process. All of this stuff is available on Leerburg. First, I'm going to need a whistle, of course, and I like the Fox 40 whistles. The reason I like the Fox 40 whistles is that they're a P-less whistle, meaning there's not a P inside the whistle, and so if they get wet, it's not going to affect them. If you have a P inside your whistle and it gets wet, sometimes it gets stuck and doesn't perform as well. So the Fox 40 whistles are loud and they're resilient to some of the various weather elements. Next, I'm going to need some food. I'm going to be using the Happy Howie's food. I like the Happy Howie's because it's soft, it's palatable, and I can cut it up to the size that I want to use specifically for the dog that I'm working with. You'll also need a sort of platform, and in this case I'm going to use a climb platform. You could also use a flat foot target in this case, but most of this video you'll see me working with one of the climb platforms. You also need a harness and a long line. Here I'm using the orange tracking harness and a textured Super Grip long line. And finally, you're going to need a couple toys of equal value. So I'm going to be using 2 of the hexa bumpers. If you don't have hexa bumpers, you could also use a couple balls, but you need to make sure that they have equal value to the dog, meaning they don't prefer one over the other. They can switch back and forth between them. In the first part of the training process, we're going to teach our dogs to actually sit on the whistle right in front of us. So if your dog already understands the sit cue or how to sit with a lure, we're simply going to place the whistle in front of that. So anytime we want to add a new cue to a known behavior, we always add it in front of the old cue. So what it's going to be is I'll blow my whistle, I'll tell my dog to sit, they'll sit, and I'll reward them. And it always happens that way, so later I can eliminate the sit cue and hope that they anticipate what's coming next. So I'll blow my whistle, I'll say sit, they'll sit, and I'll reward them. I'll blow my whistle, I'll say sit, they'll sit, I'll reward them. Eventually I'll blow my whistle, they'll be expecting the sit cue, so they'll sit and I'll reward them. Once they start anticipating what's coming next after the whistle and offering the sit, we know that they're beginning to understand the whistle as a cue to sit. If your dog doesn't understand the sit cue yet, maybe you're working with a younger dog or a puppy, what you can do is still lure them. So I lure dogs into a sit by holding food in my hand. I raise it up until their butt hits the ground. So after my dog is fluent sitting with a lure, by just luring them into it when I'm not saying anything, I simply want to add a cue to that. So I can do sit if I want them to know sit, but here I could also use the whistle. So I can blow my whistle, lure them into a sit, and as soon as they sit, I can reward them. Again, we'd eventually want to fade out the lure by just whistling and for them to sit. So it's going to look like me whistling, luring them into a sit, rewarding. Later that lure will get smaller and smaller. So it might start with a big gestured lure. Later it might come smaller and smaller. When I do it with Willie, he has a pretty small gesture. But keep in mind, if your dog needs a big gesture to go into the sit, do whatever is best for your dog. We want to make sure that once our dog is starting to understand the whistle as a cue to sit, that we're using a high rate of reinforcement, meaning that we're feeding them every single time. Later we can start to wean off the rewards, but I really want to make sure that I tell them they're correct and right in sitting on the whistle. So I make sure I'm going to pay them every single time. So now we're going to begin teaching Willie to sit to the whistle. So Willie understands the whistle already, but I'm going to go through the picture of what it's going to look like. So the key things to remember are that we're going to whistle first. Make sure that you're not saying sit and then whistle. So it's going to be whistle, then sit, and once the dog sits, we reward. Again, if your dog doesn't understand sit yet, we can lure. So it'd be whistle, lure, reward. So another note is I'm going to use my yes marker, and yes is my terminal marker, meaning the dog is released for reward. So I'm not going to use my good marker, which means I need to sustain duration at this time. So what's going to happen is I'm going to blow my whistle. I'm going to say sit. Once he sits, I'm going to release him with the word yes and give him some food. You'll note that I will give him quite a bit of food in the beginning. I want to make sure that he's rewarded at a high rate in the beginning. Later we can start to tone down the amount of treats we give him, but in the beginning I want to really make sure this is fun and rewarding for him. Come on, buddy. Sit. Yes. Sit. Yes. Sit. Yes. Sit. Yes. If the dog is starting to offer a sit, which Willie will here, what we can do is just move around to get him up again. So if he's offering a sit before I blow my whistle, I'll just move around a little bit, get him up, and then blow my whistle. Sit. Yes. Sit. Yes. Oh boy. If your dog doesn't understand the sit cue yet, maybe you're working with a puppy, we'll simply have to lure them into a sit. And when we lure them into a sit, make sure we're going up and towards us, the dog sits, and reward them. Remember, we don't want to name any behavior until we like it. So I'm not going to name a behavior until I'm very sure that the dog is going to put their butt on the ground when I lure them. So if they are putting their butt on the ground for a lure, but they don't quite understand the word sit or the whistle, we'll just start to add that cue in. So it's going to look like this. Ugh. Yes. Yes. And remember, our lure, or previously the word sit, should come almost immediately after the whistle. I don't want to give them a big gap between them quite yet. Later I'll give them a little more gap to start to anticipate and offer the sit, but in the beginning I want to make sure that they're doing the behavior almost directly after the cue. Yes. Yes. Once our dog is starting to get a number of good repetitions and you can see that they're starting to anticipate the sit after the whistle, we can start to fade out either the sit or the lure. And so what's going to happen is I'm going to blow my whistle, I'll do a slight pause. If the dog offers a sit, I'm going to reward it. If they don't immediately, I'm going to help them through it again and know that we're going to need a few more repetitions before they start to anticipate. So if I'm waiting 2, 3, 4 seconds and the dog isn't sitting, I'm going to make sure to help them right away. I don't want them trying to figure out the puzzle too much right away. I want to help them through it. Eventually, once we get to the point where we can eliminate the sit or the lure, the dog should solely be sitting on the whistle alone. So I should blow my whistle, the dog sits, and I can still reward him. And this is what that's going to look like. Once our dog is showing fluency in the first stage of simply sitting on the whistle cue, we're going to move on to the next stage, which is creating distance between the dog and I. So in the beginning, we're just teaching them to sit in front of us. Later, I want to start to add distance, and this is what it's going to look like more in the field. Eventually, my dog is going to have to sit when they're 50, 100 meters away from me. So now we're going to begin adding distance between myself and the dog. And I'm going to use a climb platform in this case. So I'm going to have Willie on the climb platform, and I'm going to start in the same picture as we just were working on, but he's going to be elevated now. And so I want him simply to sit in front of me, but he's going to be on the climb platform. So if I get him in a stand, good. So at whichever point your dog is starting to understand the whistle as a cue to sit, you can start to introduce the good marker, which is our duration marker. Meaning if I say good, the dog is expected to stay where they are and I'll come feed them. And that's going to be critical at this point because I'm now going to walk back up to my dog and feed them. I'm not going to release him to me as soon as I start making more distance. So in the beginning, I'll reward him with some goods and then feed him. So once I start making distance, he'll see that picture and he'll be able to sustain the behavior on the platform. In this case, it's certainly helpful if your dog understands a stand cue, which I'll be able to tell Willie to stand so I can tell him to sit again. But if your dog doesn't understand the stand cue, we can move around a little bit and get him back standing or moving around the platform a little bit. Good. Here, stand. Good. Stand. Good. 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 Yes. Again, my first step back is going to be about half a step. I don't want to make too much of a jump back so that the dog doesn't understand what's going on. I want to still be able to step in and help him if I need to. So the first step back is going to be half a step back and I'm going to blow my whistle. Good. Stay. Stand. Stay. Good. If we don't have a platform to use for this, we can also use a flat foot target. And how that's going to work is going to be the exact same. So I'm going to put the target down. I'm going to have my dog stand on it with her front 2 feet. Stand. Good. Good. I'm going to blow my whistle right in front of them. Good. One thing I want to note is if you're going to do this with a touchpad, to try to use a flat touchpad. The elevated touchpads like this bucket here is going to make it a little bit harder for the dog to sit. So their front feet are going to be elevated. So sitting is going to be a little less mechanically correct. So I like to use a flat touchpad when doing this drill. If our dogs are doing well at those shorter distances, we can gradually build back. So I want to make sure that the dog is really good up close, and then I'll exponentially make more and more distance. Stay. Good. Stand. Stay. Good. Stand. Stay. Good. So in the next step, we'll be transitioning from using food to toys to reward our dogs. And how we're going to do this is we're going to again use the platform. I'm going to have Willie on the platform standing next to me, and I'm going to throw the bumper. And then after the bumper lands, I'm going to whistle and I can help him sit while he's next to me. This is going to increase the excitement or the arousal level for him, so it's going to make it a little more difficult. He's not going to want to think through it. But up until now, since we've laid a good foundation, this should go pretty quickly. If you don't do those first steps first, what you're going to end up doing is fighting with your dog because they're going to be too excited to go get the bumper that they're not going to understand how to sit to the whistle. So what I'm going to do is again, throw the bumper, blow the whistle, have Willie sit, and let him go get the bumper. So for this exercise, you can also use a slip lead or a short training line just to make sure that the dog doesn't break to go get the bumper before you let them. So what's going to happen is Willie's going to be on the platform. I'm going to throw the bumper, I'm going to blow the whistle. Once he sits, I'm going to send him to get the bumper. Ready, buddy? Good boy. Out. You ready? You ready? Good. If your dog is struggling to sit to the whistle because they're too excited, we can also use our leash and a little bit of leash pressure. So if our dog understands a leash pressure sit, which is some slight tension upward to get their butt to go down, we can use that too. So I throw the bumper, if I blow my whistle and my dog doesn't sit right away, I'll pull up slightly on the leash and I can push their butt down too, just to help them out. Get it. Hold. Out. Sit. Hold. Hold. Here. Out. Sit. In this next step, we're going to be teaching our dogs to actually stop on the whistle. Up until now, they've simply been sitting to the whistle from a stationary position. Stopping to the whistle is going to be slightly different, and so we're adding that in incrementally. We've done all the sitting stuff to the whistle first, so now simply stopping and sitting to the whistle will be much easier than if we expected this from the beginning. So in this case, I'm going to use the harness, the long line, and I'm going to have 2 bumpers. What I'm going to do is take one of the bumpers, throw it out into the field. With my dog on the harness in the long line, I'm going to let him drag me about halfway there. Once he's halfway, I'm going to blow my whistle and I can stop him with the harness and help him sit if he doesn't sit right away. If he sits right away, or when he sits, we have two different choices as far as how to reward him. We can reward him by letting him get the bumper that we just threw, or we can make him come back to us and get the bumper from us. I use two different markers in this sense. Yes means take the bumper from me. Get it means take the bumper in the field. And the one I choose is going to be dependent on what the dog is doing. I need to make sure that the dog maintains commitment to getting the bumper in the field, but I also want them to eventually turn, sit, and look at me. So if my dog has a lot of commitment to the bumper in the field, often I'm going to reward back to me. If my dog starts to anticipate sitting and taking the reward from me, I'm going to make sure that the dog carries through and gets the bumper in the field. So now we've got Willie on a harness in the long line, and we're going to begin to teach him to stop on the whistle. So the first throw I'm going to make is throwing the bumper out far. I'm going to send him. Once he gets about halfway there, I'm going to blow my whistle. At the same time I'm blowing my whistle, I'm going to block him from going any further with the harness. So I'm just going to slow him down and stop him and help him get into a sit. So at this point, he understands sitting pretty well at a high state of arousal, which we just did in the last drill by throwing a bumper and making him sit. So we're going to make this a little more difficult, but we're also going to set him up for success by using the harness in the long line. Yo. Come here. Stay. Willie. So the first couple repetitions, I'm going to release him to getting the bumper out in the field, just to maintain commitment to getting the bumper in the field. So I'll throw the bumper, I'll let him go, I'll sit him, and then I'll release him to go get the bumper as long as he sits. Stay. Willie. Get it. Heel, hold. Heel. Sit. Okay. So as long as our dog is staying committed to the bumper in the field, I can start to reward him back to the bumper on me. So again, I use two different reward markers here. I use get it to get the bumper out in the field. And when I say yes, I expect him to turn around and take the bumper from me. What this is going to do is over time, he's going to start looking back at me for direction. So if he expects a bumper on me, he'll start to look back to me, expecting a reward from me, and that's going to eventually turn him around. Later, when he's turning around, I can give him directions, but right now I want to make sure he's sitting on the whistle away from me when I blow the whistle, and then I'll eventually start to get him to start facing towards me by releasing back to me with the bumper I have. Stay. Stay. Willie. Yes. Oh. So the first one, he didn't look back to me at all, but the second one, I'm going to wait a little bit until he looks back to me, knowing he's probably going to expect the next one to come back from me because the previous one was. So again, he's going to look, I'm going to wait for him to look back at me, and I'm going to release him back to me, and that's going to start to turn him around and face me for his whistle sits. Come here, sit. Stay. Willie. Yes. Stay. Willie. Yes. heel, stay. Really. Good. Hey, hey. Yes. Sit. In this drill, if our dog is starting to anticipate too much coming back to us, we want to make sure they're dedicated to the bumper in the field. So I can always throw bumpers and just let them drag me all the way in to the bumper out in the field, which will look like this. Willie. All right, buddy. Heel. Out. Out. Sit. Sit. Stay. Heel. Willie. Willie, get it, get it. Yes. When our dog is doing really well, sitting to the whistle, I'm going to begin to eliminate the back pressure. So I'm going to use the back pressure on the harness and long line only if I need it. So what's going to happen is I'm going to send him for the bumper out in the field. I'm going to blow my whistle. If he sits on the whistle quickly, I'm going to release him very quickly for the reward. If he doesn't sit quickly, I'm going to stop him with the long line. Stay. Willie. Get it. Heel. Willie. Good. Sit. Good. Yes. Here. One thing to remember is that sitting to the whistle on a mark where the dog sees the bumper fall is going to be a lot harder than sitting to the whistle on a blind retrieve, because the dog is going to be much more motivated for a bumper that they see fall than a bumper that they don't know or they don't see is out there, but they know they have to go get. So because they're going to be more motivated to get the bumper in the field on a mark, it's going to be much more difficult for them to sit to the whistle. So if they can do that in this context, transitioning over to the blind retrieves is going to be much easier. As you can see, after every whistle, Willie's starting to turn and face me more. So the more repetitions I do, the more he's going to want to look back at me for the toy that I have. Get it. Get it. Good. Yes. And in the final step, we're going to begin to layer pressure over the whistle sit. And I do this in a very controlled environment. The reason I like to introduce pressure now, even if the dog is doing everything completely right, is that they can begin to understand how to react appropriately to the stimulation of the e-collar. If we wait until we need the e-collar, the chances are we're not going to have the tools in place to help the dog carry through with the behavior in the way that we want. So I want to make sure to condition them to the electronic collar in a controlled environment. So once we do need it, they have a full understanding of what it means and how to appropriately react to it. So before I get into any of the details of the use of the electronic collar, I want to make sure that you have a good understanding of how to use the electronic collar. I'm not going to go deep into discussion of how we use the electronic collar. So if you need a more detailed explanation of properly using the electronic collar, you can check out the various DVDs we sell on the topic. So when we start using the electronic collar, we're going to be pressuring the dogs to sit. We're not going to be correcting them for not sitting. And there's a big difference here. Pressuring them to sit means that they're going to turn off pressure once they sit. Punishing or correcting them for not sitting means I would wait for them not to comply and then correct them. So pressuring to sit means my stimulation will start before I ask the dog to sit. And this will instill a sense of obligation to sitting on the whistle. So up until now, the dogs have been sitting because they want to access a reward. Now they're going to be sitting because they have to. So how this is going to work is when the dog is running to the bumper on the harness and the long line, I'm going to start the electronic collar at a relatively low level. As soon as I start the electronic collar, I'm going to blow the whistle. And as soon as the dog sits, the electronic collar turns off. So of course I have to be using a continuous function on the electronic collar at a low level where the dog can feel it, but it's not overly aversive to the dog. So I want them to feel it, I want them to hear the whistle, and I want them to sit. And as soon as they sit, the electronic collar will go away. This would be considered negative reinforcement. Others call it escape training because the dog learns to escape the pressure by performing the behavior that we ask. So before we begin to introduce pressure into the whistle sits, we need to add a couple of pieces of equipment. So in the video, I'm going to be using a British style slip lead. This is the Mendota slip lead that we sell here at Leerburg. It basically acts as a slip collar and a leash built in one. If you do use a prong collar as a training collar, you can use that with a normal 4 foot or 6 foot leash. I do like to recommend, if you're going to use one of these leashes, make sure that it doesn't have a handle at the end. So eventually we're going to let our dogs drag these around, and if you have a handle on them, sometimes they can get caught on stuff and they're going to interfere with your training more. So if you're going to use a lead, try to use one without a handle at the end. So the final step of the training process is we're going to introduce the electronic collar. So if you're going to use an e-collar in training, I'm going to recommend the Dogtra collars. I use the Dogtra Arc, and here you'll see I have a 2-box setup. And the point of the 2-box setup is twofold. So first we have 2 boxes, so we have 4 contact points instead of 2, which is going to distribute the stimulation more evenly across the dog's neck. Secondly, because I have the 2 boxes, if one happens to be out of contact or malfunctions, I still have the second collar as a backup, which is going to give me a much more reliable stimulation and is going to be much more consistent for the dog. You'll also notice I'm using one of the Easy On collars. And the point of this is the elastic helps form fit around the dog's neck. Also, the quick release makes it easy for us to put it on and take it off our dogs whenever we need to. So at this point, our dogs should be pretty fluent in sitting to the whistle, but I want to make sure that they understand how to react appropriately to pressure. And we're going to go back and we're going to start with a little bit of leash pressure first, and then we're going to layer in the electronic collar. So my dog should understand that a slight upward tension of the leash means for them to sit. If your dog doesn't understand the leash pressure portion of sitting yet, what it's going to look like is I'm going to introduce the leash with a little light pressure upwards. I'm going to tell my dog to sit. As soon as he sits, that pressure is going to turn off. If your dog doesn't sit as well, you can also help by pushing their butt down if you need to, or luring with food. But essentially with a leash, it's going to look like this. Come here, buddy. Sit. Good. So the leash pressure starts. I tell him to sit. He sits. The pressure goes away. Willie understands the light pressure upwards means sit already, so he's anticipating pretty quickly. So it's hard to see exactly, but let's see. Sit. Good. So the moment his butt hits the ground is when the pressure turns off. So he escapes the pressure once he complies and performs the behavior. But since he already has a good understanding of sit or the whistle, this should all go really quickly. So when trainers teach sit with leash pressure, sometimes the dogs can get more stressed out. But because we've done such a solid foundation with reward-based training, this should go very quickly and the stress on the dog should be very minimal. So on top of the pressure, we can still use our rewards. So we don't necessarily have to. The reward is the release of the pressure, but we can still add in food on top of the release of the pressure. The leash pressure starts, I tell my dog to sit, the dog sits, the pressure goes away, and I can mark with a yes and feed. So it's gonna look like this. Sit, yes, good boy. Sit, good, yes. Sit, good, yes. Sit, good, yes. So the thing to note is that he's escaping pressure when he sits, as well as being reinforced with food. Once the dog is sitting well with leash pressure, we're going to begin to introduce the electronic collar. And here I'm always going to use the continuous function because I want the stimulation to be continuous until the dog performs the sit in this case. So I'm going to start the stimulation at a very low level. Again, I'm not going into the details of how to properly condition your dog to electronic collar, but it's going to be at a very low level, so it's going to be mildly aversive. The dog will feel that. I'll tell them to sit. As soon as they sit, that stimulation will go away. If I need to use the leash pressure as well in this case, I can help them through the sit. So it's going to look like this. Sit. Yes. Sit. Good. Yes. Sit. Good. Yes. Should probably be using my whistle. So keep in mind from a repetition standpoint, I don't want to do too many of these with my dog in a row. I don't want to do this over and over and over again. When we introduce the electronic collar, we need to make sure that the dog feels a release of stress when the electronic collar turns off. If I immediately go back into another repetition, they'd never feel like they've completely escaped the stress of the electronic collar. So when the dog sits and we reward them, we can always take a minute or two for a break and maybe do 3, 4, 5 of these in a session. I don't want to overdo it. I don't want to do a ton of repetitions. In this case, repetition is not your friend. I want to make sure I'm doing correct timing so the dog understands it, but I don't want to do them over and over and over again. I don't want this cumulative stress to build up. I just want them to begin to understand how to react appropriately to the pressure. once our dog is understanding how to appropriately respond to the pressure of the electronic collar just sitting next to us, we'll begin to incorporate it in the dragon game, which we did earlier. In the same kind of situation, I'm going to send my dog to a bumper that I've thrown out into the field. Once he's halfway there, I'm going to start the electronic collar just briefly before I blow the whistle. So I'll start the collar, blow the whistle, and as soon as my dog sits, the pressure will turn off. I'll let him sit there for a couple seconds before I release him either back to me or to the bumper in the field. This can get a little complicated, having the line in one hand, the electronic collar in another hand, the whistle in your mouth, and be able to throw a bumper at the same time. So if you need to use a friend to help you drag in or throw the bumper for you, go ahead and do that. But since it's just going to be me and a lot of people train by themselves, I'm going to show you how to do that all from me alone. But if you need to use a friend, go ahead and do that. Stay. Really? Get it. Really? Yes. Now that we have a couple repetitions of me helping him with the line as well, I'm going to make sure to throw the bumper pretty far, and I'm going to use mostly the electronic collar to stop him if I need to. So I'm going to start the electronic collar, I'm going to blow the whistle, and then as soon as he sits, the pressure will turn off, but I'm going to try to minimize the use of back pressure used in this drill. Stay. Willie. Yes. Hit. Willie. Get it. So if we think our dog is doing well with the whistles and they're responding appropriately to the electronic collar pressure, we can begin to take the line off, because we know if we have to use the electronic collar, our dogs should appropriately respond to it. So now I'm going to take the line off of Willie, I'm going to throw a bumper for him, a really far one, and I'm going to try to whistle him really early. I don't want him barreling down the field and getting super close to the bumper and having to sit, so I'm going to do it really early. And then I'll probably release him back to the bumper. And if I need to use the electronic collar, he should be responding appropriately to it. Come here. Heel. 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 Willie. Sit. Back. Get it. Here. Good. Back. Out. Sit. Stay. Willie.